The 2026 NFL Draft is 4 nights away. Pittsburgh, Thursday night, 257 picks over 3 days. The teams picking in the top 10 have been planning for this moment since January. The film sessions, the pro days, the arguments in the draft room, and the 2 a.m. phone calls all comes down to this moment. But for some teams, there's no turning back now. But this week, we're doing something different.
Welcome to the Sunday Standard.
Yes, the board is live, and everything that comes next this week, here, right now, all 257 picks laid out in front of you as we go. Moving forward, scores, news, everything right here as you watch the Sunday Standard. So let's get into the episode. So before we get into the teams, let's talk about the class because, look, we've got a quarterback that I knew from the moment I saw him rush and dive for the end zone against Miami in the national championship that he was going to be the number one pick in this draft, irregardless, because he was willing to put the team on his back. I saw how he talked to the media. I just everything about him, his size, his ability, just it all packaged into one is what a team like the Raiders absolutely need. And I think with his 41 touchdowns, his 6 interceptions at a 72% rate, a 16-0, a national championship, Heisman, and finally getting Kurt Signetti to give us a smile at that national championship. Look, he's going to be a stud there in Las Vegas. There's no doubt about that. But outside of Mendoza, Ty Simpson is a great quarterback. It sort of died off there towards the end of the year and we sort of started to see cracks. But like I've said in previous episodes, I think we saw enough to, and without a question, he's the second quarterback of the class. So where does he fall? Look, is he a first round pick? I think he is to the right team. Like I've said previously, Rams or Pittsburgh would be a really good fit to sitting behind a future Hall of Famer to get those bits and pieces right that we saw him struggle with. I think they're probably the best two landing spots. Unfortunately, I see if he goes to Arizona, I think he fails. I think he's not going to learn as much as he should sitting behind a guy like Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew there at Arizona. I want to see him go to a good situation for him to develop, to him become the best possible quarterback, because I don't want to see him go down the path of him ending up at a New York Jets where he's been sitting behind Geno. Look, nothing to take away from Geno. He's had some great years, but he's not the guy. And I'm still really not sold on why the Jets have decided to bring him in to be that bridge guy, but look, who knows. Anyway, so outside of Mendoza, you're looking at probably 4, 5, 6 defensive players that are a top 10 lock that should go in the top 10, or at least 4. We're talking about Arvell Reese. We're talking about David Bailey. We're talking about Sonny Styles. We're talking about Caleb Downs. Those 4 to me are an absolute lock. Shouldn't fall outside of the top 10. And then you could add maybe Ruben Bain to that argument, but I will discuss him a little bit later on in the episode. Then, obviously, you've got Jeremiah Love out of Notre Dame, 100 yards last year, 18 touchdowns. He's going to be an elite player that comes out of this class, I think, for years to come. I just, again, hope he goes to the right system that allows him to really grow with a team, whether that be the Titans, whether that be the Giants, whether that be sort of maybe a Washington Commanders if he does drop that far, if someone doesn't move up to grab him. Are people going to move up to grab Jeremiah? Again, I'm not sure they will. Will they move up to go and grab a Sonny Styles or a Caleb Downs that I'm massive on? More than likely, yes. So we will discuss that again also later on in the episode. And then you've also got a few receivers that you can potentially look at taking quite a lot higher than they potentially should go. You've got a Carnell Tate, you've got a Jordan Tyson, those kind of guys that do bring you a weapon for quarterbacks that do need them in those sort of early picks. But again, we'll wait and see what happens there. Look, teams wanting a pass rusher or a linebacker in this top 10, happy days. Anyone looking for a quarterback, you're either moving up and grabbing a Ty Simpson because you think he's worth moving up for, or this is that gap year. That is you've got your bridge quarterback to get you through the year, hoping to get one of the 6 or 7 first round quarterbacks that are going to go next year. So let's move on to the teams that I think are under the most pressure in this draft, because there's 3 that come to mind. Now, the first cab off the rank shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, and that is the New York Jets. The Jets have 2 first-round picks, and with that, they have a total of 9 selections across the draft. Now, that's more capital than most teams, and look, you've brought in Geno, you've missed so many times. You haven't made the playoffs in 16 years. Who do you take? You've got Arvell Reese, who's got the highest ceiling, but is a little bit more of a long-term project and will be a great player, no doubt. Or you've got David Bailey out of Texas Tech, who seems to be more NFL ready, more pro ready, but my concern is there that his ceiling isn't as high as Arvell. So as well as the Jets cancelling David Bailey's meeting with them this week as part of the top 30 meeting, so that sort of throw up a little few red flags for me. Potentially, look, they might already have made their decision that they're going to take him, and they just want to see what else is out there, so they can potentially either package something up and move up again earlier into the round, or are they waiting to see who falls to them at 16? Again, it'll be interesting to see, but I think the Jets have made up their mind, and with that 16th pick, I think the Jets they have an open spread. Do they trade down and potentially get a few more picks to again look towards next year, or do you take Ty Simpson there at 16 if he's available, or do you go and get one of the remaining wide receivers that are sort of in that mid-range? Capital means nothing if you keep missing. Get it right. New York, please, for the sake of every New York Jets fan watching this, you need to get it right. This organisation's been in shambles for far too long. Moving on to the team that I think is also under a lot of pressure coming into this draft to sort of perform is the Washington Commanders. Now, the narrative here is more complicated than people remember, because 2 years ago, they were 12-5. And then last year, Jaden Daniels gets injured, they have issues, and they go in 5-12. Terry McLaurin is hurt as well, so that doesn't help when your wide receiver 1 is injured. He went on an 8-game losing streak. Obviously, you're missing your round 2 and round 4 picks from the Tunsil trade. Look, at 7, you have the ability to potentially look at Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, Jeremiah Love still going to be there. Do you take him? Look, I think if neither Downs or Love is available at that point, you trade down. I'm not entirely sure. You stay in that position. If those top guys aren't available that fill your needs, you trade down, you build up a little bit more capital, and you see if you can get some maybe gems in that later first round, maybe in the early second round, see what you can build up, because you do have minimal capital in this draft, so you're going to make it worthwhile where you can. So I think a lot to play out there for Washington this week in Pittsburgh. Moving on to the final sort of team that I think is under the most pressure, and a team that I'm saying I'm jumping on the Tennessee Titans bandwagon. I'm fully in. My love for Cam Ward is continuing to grow. I think he is the franchise quarterback of the future for this team, and I think it's the pick here at number 4. I've been umming and ahhing, but at the end of the day, I think Jeremiah Love is the pick you need to make. Like I said last week, we've seen it so many times. You pair a fantastic quarterback, which I think long-term Cam Ward will be, with an elite level running back. It wins football games, and you need to take a little bit of pressure off Cam Ward to allow him to hand the ball off to someone that can get you yards. And it's not just the yards that he gets you from running the ball. It's the yards that he gets for catching the ball. Like, he can get to the outside and you can just pop it off to him, and you're going to get yards after catch, yards after contact through the roof. 1,300 yards last year. It's just look, if you're comparing him to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, you take him. I think, like I said in a couple of episodes previously, I thought he was going to be a shoo-in for the Heisman last year. He's that good. But then, yes, look, you've got a brand new coach in Robert Saleh, who, as we all know, is such an incredible defensive mind that I think potentially they also look at, depending on how picks 1 to 3 play out, who, if anyone trades up, does anyone go and grab someone earlier than they expect, that then you've sort of forced to make a decision. And then that's when I think they look at, if an Arvell Reese is there at 4, does Salah say, we're taking him instead? And then look to maybe fill their running back position later on in the draft to sort of see, look, who can we get? Obviously, there's not really much more depth in the draft of the running back position. The other running back out of Notre Dame, Jadarian Price, is probably the number 2 running back on the list. Obviously, there's a few issues with his fumbling, etc. But I think he's your number 2 pick there at running back. There's still so many free agents I think they could potentially bring in to help build out this sort of weaponry for Cam. Obviously, Calvin Ridley's still there. DK, like I've spoken about, the emergence there. So I guess it'll be interesting to see sort of what direction that they do go. This pick doesn't define the season. It defines a franchise, because they're building something really special down there in Tennessee. So I guess we'll wait and see. But yeah, interesting. Now, before the chaos predictions, let's get into the players whose draft night stories haven't been written yet. First of all is Caleb Downs. Now, I've been huge on this bloke since watching his last season there at Ohio State. He's by far the smartest player in the draft. He's a generational talent, and I have no doubt in my mind that he will win 8 to 10 Pro Bowl in his career in the NFL. So we'll come back in 10 years, 12 years' time and sort of look back, and it'll be interesting to see sort of where he lands. But I think he's going to be that sort of talent, which is why it concerns me that there's the fact that he could fall outside of the top 5 to a team in that sort of Kansas City, Washington, maybe even as far as sort of a Miami at 11, maybe a Dallas at 12 if they don't package something up, which we'll talk about a little later. To move up the board. But the fact that Eric Berry in 2010 was the last safety to go in the top 5 concerns me. That the position isn't obviously such a highly touted position, like a weapon on the offense, or sort of an edge rusher there on defense, or a linebacker inside, outside, would be my only concern, that you sort of you're not willing to take a chance on a generational talent like Caleb is. So I guess we will, again, have to wait and see where he lands, but he should go higher, and I'll be disappointed if he falls any lower than he should. Another player whose name has been in the media a little bit this week, due to an unfortunate circumstance that he found himself in 2024, is Jr., the edge rusher out of Miami. Now, look, unfortunately, the motor vehicle accident that he was in wasn't found guilty. Charges were dropped. There was no drugs or alcohol in his system. And this is not to take anything away from the fact that he is an extremely athletically gifted player. Obviously, put aside the concerns about his arm length, the fact that this has been brought out into the media only a week before the draft is obviously a concerning thing. Obviously, as well, front officers were fully aware of this prior to, I guess, the general public and the media knowing about it. So people in these front offices would have taken all this into consideration. But the fact that it did still happen. I guess everything that has happened with these players getting into these high-powered vehicles and then causing harm to not only themselves, to people around them and the general public, Henry Ruggs, it's something that the teams need to do due diligence on. Unfortunately, so that's why I think there is a very high possibility that a team will pass on him because of that. And I think he does sort of fall out of the top 10. He still should go first round, and he will, but I think it'll be sort of towards that mid-teens, even as late as 19, 20, sort of somewhere in there. Unless, of course, a team is willing to take a gamble on it and get him, and I would have no concerns with a team taking that risk, because at the end of the day, as long as that's in the past and he can put himself into a position where he's not found himself in that position again, I think his upside and his ability to be that aggressive edge rusher that he was there in Miami, I think he's the kind of guy you do go and grab early on and move up for him if need be. And finally, a wide receiver that obviously has extremely high upside and is a wide receiver one talent, but the concern about his hamstring and his injuries and his durability is obviously Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. Look, he's been projected to go anywhere from sort of 8th to 21st. I think he could drop potentially even lower than that. He is due to do a private workout that I believe quite a few teams are attending to sort of see where he's at. But I think, unfortunately, just due to the inconsistency with his inability to stay healthy, will be a downfall and would probably see him sort of drop to a sort of mid-20s sort of pickup. But if anyone grabs him sort of that later rounds, as long as he stays healthy, you're going to get a steal down there in the late draft, first round with the guy like Jordan Tyson. So it'll be interesting. Look, any one of these three can slide. Somebody's going to get a deal, and you'll want to know where they go when that happens. Now let's talk about what might happen before a single draft pick is even made. Look, I got the vibe that Jerry Jones is just going to do something this year that sort of flips the script completely. He's got picks 12 and 20. Obviously have moved, I believe, their sort of second and third round picks. Quinnen Williams, obviously, and then I believe a pick that was moved for the George Pickens trade to the Steelers as well. So they're not picking again until 92. 12 and 20, you package them up, you maybe get something else there if you're looking for maybe a sort of a second round, depending on who you move to. You package something up, you go and get a Sonny Styles that sort of really solidifies that defense, because God forbid they need help back there since moving on from Micah. So that'll be interesting to see what Jerry does. I think they do need to move. I think they do need to sort of change things up, really get things going, and hopefully Jerry sort of sees the light and makes a few moves to sort of spice things up, I'd like to say. Dexter Lawrence there obviously requested a trade out of New York a couple of weeks ago now. Look, calls are being made. I think a lot of teams could use a guy like Dexter Lawrence. So, look, I think maybe someone makes a call, gives up a bit of capital, goes and gets this guy, and that sort of, again, changes what is he worth. Yet to be seen, but I think maybe one of those sort of early round picks could potentially be moved around to go and get a guy like Dexter Lawrence. And finally, like I said, episode 7 here at the Sunday Standard, I think the Cardinals have the key pick in this draft there at 3. It's one of the most tradable spots. I think the Arizona Cardinals have the ability to give that up to team that needs it, and they're in that sort of closer to that window of being in playoff contention, if not further up that sort of window, whereas Arizona Cardinals know exactly who they are. You got Jacoby Brissett, you've got Gardner Minshew as your quarterbacks going to be fighting it out, so you could potentially sort of just write this year off already and then move into next year starting fresh, going to get your guy as your future franchise quarterback out of those big group coming up through the system next year. So I guess some interesting moves to be made there on draft night. Do the Cardinals move down? Does somebody move out and move up? And just I thought of just an interesting statistic that 46% of the final 10 picks are traded at least once historically. So look, we shall certainly wait and see. There is an average of 5 to 6 first round trades per draft night recently. So this year, the market has more active buyers than I can remember. So Thursday night is going to get a little bit interesting. Let's make some absurd calls. And this is not me going sort of out of left field here, but I certainly think a couple of things are going to happen on draft night that sort of nobody really sees coming. So I'm going to predict them now. Somebody from, you look at all the mock drafts out there, Kuiper, Fields, sort of everyone there at ESPN or across just other creators that are doing mocks. And I think there will be a player that is not part of everyone's sort of consensus top 10 picks that will go earlier than anybody expected. And everyone will lose their mind, and then it'll sort of just start a train reaction of being people sort of making picks that aren't maybe what they expected to make because players are still available when they got to that position in the draft. Again, I think that sort of comes back to where the Arizona Cardinals are. They're at 3. I think someone moves up, grabs that third pick, Arizona move down, and then that sort of just jumbles everything up, and then other teams are sort of making calls here and there. I think this is going to be a very chaotic first night there in Pittsburgh. One move, that's all it takes. One move and the whole board flips. So let me tell you one thing about this draft. Mendoza is the number 1 pick. That's done. Lock it, send the card, happy days. But after pick 1, nobody agrees on anything. Everyone's got who thinks is going to be the number 2. Everyone thinks it's going to be Harvell Reese. I think the Jets do something that only the Jets would do, and that all just goes haywire from here. By pick 10, at least 3 teams got someone, no one in their mock predicted. Once it breaks, it doesn't stop breaking. So watch that on Thursday and take that as a grain of salt, as you will. But before all of that happens, we've got to finish off the Sunday Standard Power Index for its final week here before we get into the draft and before I start to have a look at boards and depth charts and sort of realign everything and then come back to you as we progress through this off season to sort of see where everybody stands. But with that being said, at number 5, I do have the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen truly and finally has a wide receiver 1 with the addition of DJ Moore. I also really like the addition of Bradley Chubb on that 3-year deal. Still got 8.5 sacks last year. I think he's going to be a weapon there on the defensive side of the ball. Keep him healthy. He's a stud, and I really like that. So they're always dangerous. Now they're even more dangerous with the addition of a couple of players across the board. Is this the year we finally see them get over that hump? New coach. I think Joe Brady is the guy to take them forward. I think they were sort of stagnant there. I think this is potentially the year that finally they get somewhere deep in the playoff run. Number 4 on the Sunday Standard Power Index, I've got the San Francisco 49ers. The talent is real. You bring in a guy like Mike Evans, you bring in a guy like Christian Kirk, George Kittle coming back off injury. Look, Mike Evans is at the end of his career, but he's chosen taking money there in Tampa to come across to the other side of the country to play for a team like the Funners, who are, I feel like they're much closer to a Super Bowl than Tampa is. So I just really hope this team can stay healthy. Excited to see them here in Melbourne on the 11th of September, here live at the MCG. At number 3, on the Sunday Standard Power Index, I do have the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, they've paid the Super Bowl tax. Everybody wants to get paid, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, they can't. You've lost Kenneth Walker down there to the Chiefs, Tariq Woolen to the Eagles, and Kobe Bryant over to the Bears. Look, at the end of the day, they're still in that window. I still think they are very competitive. I think we've seen the guy that Sam Darnold is. He's a stud. It's so good to see him finally get his chocolates and show to the league that he is not a bust and that he's a stud and he's just put in the work and put in the effort. 5 teams in 8 years. It's just, it's good to see. So I think, Seattle will still be super competitive this year. You've gone and paid JSN. They're still in the conversation for sure. Moving on to the number 2 position here at the Sunday Standard for the Power Index. I do have the other team that was in the Super Bowl, the New England Patriots. Look, Drake May is still only so young, and the fact now that he has come so close to touching the Lombardi Trophy, I really think we're going to see the Patriots be sort of around the mark for some time. Look, you've brought in Romeo Dobbs from the Packers. You paid him $80 million over 4 years. Was that the right pick? Obviously, you've decided that Stephon Diggs has got too much luggage, and I think that at the end of the day, Romeo Dobbs will grow into the role. You've also brought in a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker, who as well I've mentioned in a previous episode, I think as long as you keep this kid healthy, he has a lot to offer. And in the number one position of the Sunday Standard Power Index is none other than the Los Angeles Rams. It feels like the 2021 season all over again for some reason. I'm just getting this feeling that with Matthew Stafford coming off an MVP season, hoping that Puka Nacua can get himself right mentally. Devontae Adams in probably going to be close to one of his final years. The addition of Trent McDuffie. It just feels like this team is putting all the pieces together to make that final run whilst they've still got a guy like Stafford under centre. They just can't manage to keep this sort of organisation flowing and sort of remaining to be up there. But I think moving forward, we may see sort of a downturn of them after this season if Stafford moves on. So bringing in a guy like Ty Simpson there at 13, if he's available, I think would be, again, really a smart decision, especially if you're not going to get another year out of Stafford. You bring him in, sit him behind, and he certainly grows and develops behind a, no doubt, first ballot Hall of Famer. Look, that's it for episode 8 here at the Sunday Standard. With the draft just around the corner, I will see you on Thursday night with the first official full Sunday Standard mock draft.